No, not quite, not yet.
He said yes.
Okay.
Oh, nobody else can say. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't think it was. Good morning. My name is Jackie Kale. My pronouns are she and her. Our chalice lighting words are "Every endeavor begins with a first step" by Charles F. Flagg. Every endeavor begins with a first step and encounters darkness and difficulty along the way. We know the darkness of ignorance, of fear, of tyranny. Yet we know the dawning of light, the beginnings of hope, and the renewal of life. May we gather today together and help each other to hold these contradictions in the days to come.
Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. I'm Mary Kay Stillwell, a worship associate and a member of your Among team. My pronouns are she, her, hers. It's good to be with all of you, whether you're in the sanctuary, tuning in on YouTube this morning, or viewing the service later. All the participants in this morning's service are members of the Beloved Conversations Among team. Our minister, the Reverend Oscar Sinclair, is streaming with us this morning. If you'd like to get a longer look at and closer look at the slides that went by at the beginning of service, please look at the website, the church website. They'll be homed there. Reverend Mark Morrison Reed writes that, quote, "The central task of a religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered among the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we're not struggling for justice on our own, but are members of a larger community. The religious community is essential. Alone, our vision is too narrow to see that all must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed." End of quote. In our struggle for justice, we often find our vision narrowed by racism, which we fail to recognize or understand from the vantage point of those it harms most directly. Novelist Toni Morrison reminds us that, quote, "The very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you from explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language, and so you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says that you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says that you have no kingdoms, so you dredge those up. None of this is necessary," unquote. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln aspires to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and our world. We have a big vision here, and we know that creating a loving community begins with welcome. So whether this is your first time or your 500th time, if you came here hopeful or heartbroken, whether your age, gender identity, race, or ethnicity, whomever you love, and wherever you find yourself today in your journey with anti-racism, you are welcome here. As we enter into worship, take a moment wherever you are to center yourself. Take a few breaths. Our opening hymn today is number 318, "We Would Be One." Please join us, stand if you are able, and we will sing together.
Our story today is called Child of the Civil Rights Movement, and it's written by Paula Young Shelton. Mama was from Alabama. Daddy was from Louisiana, the Deep South. They had been called bad names, treated badly, told, "You can't do that," just because of the color of their skin. They grew up with Jim Crow, laws that said Black people had to sit in the back of the bus, the last car of the train, the balcony of the movie theater, laws that said Black people couldn't vote. I was born in New York, where there was no Jim Crow, but one day when Mom and Daddy were watching the news, they saw something called the Freedom Riders, Black and white students riding buses together from the north to the south to protest the bad laws. They watched as racists pulled the students from their seats and set the buses on fire. "We have to go help," my father exclaimed. "We have to go home," my mother declared. So Mama and Daddy packed up their 3 little girls, Andrea, Lisa, and me, and we went back to Georgia, back to Jim Crow, where whites could, but Blacks could not, back to the heart of the civil rights movement. My first protest. In our new home in Atlanta, Jim Crow was everywhere. At first, I thought Jim Crow was a big black crow that squawked whenever a Black person tried to get a good seat. "Caw, caw, caw, you can't sit there." But really, he was a white man who lived long ago. He painted his face black and made fun of African Americans. He didn't sound very nice to me. I guess that's why they named the laws after him, because they weren't very nice either. Despite Jim Crow, a few restaurants had opened where Blacks and whites could eat together. One Sunday, Mama and Daddy decided to see how far things had really come. So after church, we went to have brunch at the brand new Holiday Inn restaurant. We stepped into the fancy lobby with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and we asked for a table, but they wouldn't let us in. We looked at all the empty tables with white tablecloths and the few white faces that stared at us in horror. All we wanted was to sit down and eat. I was so hungry that I started crying, but they wouldn't let us in. "My baby's hungry," Mama said, while I kept crying louder and louder. Mama and Daddy didn't try to stop me. They simply sat me down and let me cry. And did I ever? I screamed at the top of my lungs. My very first protest, my own little sit-in. But still, they wouldn't let us in. Uncle Martin. Uncle Martin had a big, broad smile and eyes that twinkled. "Come here, girl," he'd say whenever our families would meet at one of the only pools for African Americans in Atlanta, the Ollie Street YMCA. "Are you ready to get in that water and teach me how to swim?" Run. I would run as fast as my skinny little legs could carry me, run and leap into his wide open arms and fly as he threw me high into the air. "No," I would scream and laugh, my arms clasped tightly around his neck as he pretended to throw me in. But Uncle Martin wasn't really my uncle, not my blood anyway. We were close because our fathers worked together, close because our mothers worried together, close because we all struggled together, close because we were brought together for a common goal, a common good. We were one family, the family of the American Civil Rights Movement. The Civil Rights family. Like all families, we'd have dinner together, and since there were so few restaurants that served African Americans, we'd often eat at friends' houses. We might walk around the corner to Uncle Ralph and Aunt Juanita's, or go to Uncle Martin and Aunt Coretta's, so everyone would come to our house, or everyone would come to our house. One night when it was our turn to host, I sat under the kitchen table watching and listening, watching the folks in the dining room, listening to the booming voices, angry sometimes very angry. They were talking about Selma, Alabama, where, as in most cities in the South, Blacks had been denied the right to vote. They were organizing a huge march to protest from Selma to Montgomery. They had marched twice before, and twice before they'd been beaten back. With everyone trying to talk at once, I thought they sounded just like instruments tuning up before a concert. Blackwell, the professor, was like a trombone, so smooth, clearly presenting the facts. Jose ambled around the table in his overalls, tooting like a tuba. "I was in Selma last time, and we've got to go back." "Let's wait," Daddy said, the mellow saxophone of reason. I flinched when Big Orange stood up, his huge frame towering above everyone else. That ain't right, Andy, he boomed like a bass drum. We got to help these folks now. Uncle Ralph agreed, his voice rising melodically above the horns and drum like a violin. Then Aunt Dorothy's sweet soprano joined in. We've got to get the young people involved, she sang. If they can go to Vietnam to fight, they can fight at home. Mama's flute chimed in from the kitchen, reminding the men that the women would be the key to any march's success. Meanwhile, Uncle Martin sat silent and listened to the orchestra play. Uncle Martin loved the music of his friends and knew that each instrument needed to be heard, but he also knew that in the end, they must come together like a symphony, as one. Paula, baby, Mama said, set the table. I slipped out from my hiding place, grabbed the napkins and forks, and bounced into the dining room, my nightgown fluttering behind me. The discussion continued as passionately as before, but as I set each place, the person seated paused, looked at me and smiled, patted my head, or gave me a gentle hug. Dinner's ready, Mama called, carrying in a large dish of macaroni and cheese. Let me help you, Jean, Aunt Dorothy volunteered and went to get the bowl of green beans and a pitcher of sweet tea. In the kitchen, Andrea grabbed the baked chicken and marched in first as always. Lisa came next carrying a big, beautiful salad, and I got the basket of cornbread. Sometime later, when everyone was done, there were hugs and kisses and I'm so full I can't walk, and raving about the macaroni and cheese, which seemed to come from a magic pot that filled up every time you scooped some of the creamy casserole onto a plate. No matter how many people came to dinner, there was always enough to go around, enough to strengthen, enough to comfort the family of the civil rights movement. Selma to Montgomery. Daddy was away a lot. Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, while Mama stayed home to care for us. He was away marching, organizing, registering voters, protesting unfair laws, teaching nonviolence. Sometimes he was beaten. Sometimes he went to jail for breaking the Jim Crow laws that said blacks and whites couldn't eat together or go to school together or even drink from the same water fountain. Sometimes he went to jail just for marching. But when Daddy was getting ready to march to Montgomery, Mama said, I'm marching too. So they packed up their 3 girls and we headed to Selma. We gathered at Brown Chapel AME Church the next morning with thousands of others. I looked around and saw so many different kinds of people, black and white, young and old, rich and poor. There were Jewish rabbis, Catholic priests, and lots of Baptist ministers. There was even a man with one leg who everybody called Sunshine. There were people from the South and people from the North. One group had come all the way from Hawaii and they handed out leis to the leaders. Excitement flashed through the air like lightning. Then Uncle Martin linked arms with a priest and extended his hand to Aunt Coretta as if to ask her to dance. And the march was on. Since I was only 4 years old, I could walk for just a little while. Mama carried me until she got tired, and then I got passed from uncle to aunt. From aunt to uncle. Lisa was 8, still small enough to ride on Daddy's shoulders as he jogged up and down the long line of marchers, shouting at us to pick up the pace or starting a song to keep our spirits high. He ran up and down that long line so many times. He said he marched from Selma to Montgomery 10 times that week. Andrea was 10 years old and she marched proudly that day. Do you want to ride, Mama asked, offering to put her in one of the cars that followed behind for old folks and young folks and just plain tired folks. No, I want to march, she answered firmly. That night, I fell asleep in Mama's arms. When I woke up, I was at my grandparents' house, not far from Selma. Andrea, Lisa, and I spent the rest of the week there until Mama and Daddy continued on. It would take 4 days to march the 50 miles from Selma to Montgomery, the National Guard escorting the peaceful protesters the whole way to keep them safe. All over the country, people watched on TV as the group marched triumphantly into Montgomery. President Johnson saw it too. The Voting Rights Act of 1965. Then one joyous evening, the 6th of August, 1965, my family sat around our small black and white television set. Uncle Martin stood over the shoulder of President Johnson and watched him sign the bill that would make sure all people, black and white, could vote and no one could stop them. Curled up on Mama's lap, I thought about our march while pictures flashed across the screen. Andrea and Lisa shouted at the TV, pointing out folks we knew and the places we'd been. We talked about the singing, the praying, the friends and family, even the tired feet. It made me glow with pride to know that I had played one small part. But even then, I also knew that we'd won just one battle and there were many more to come. And one day, when Mama and Daddy were too tired to march, too weary to carry us on their shoulders, too exhausted to fight another battle, the baton would pass to us and we would march on, children of the civil rights movement. And that's the end of our story today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Each year in the spring, our members vote for 10 organizations for the Share the Plate program. And this month, the Share the Plate recipient is NAACP Lincoln Branch. Their president, Dr. Dwayne Mays, is here to tell us a little bit more about their work. Welcome, Dr. Mays.
Thank you. And first of all, let me thank you for last year's donation that you made. We were able to fund 3 students for scholarships and $1,000 each. And so we're very happy, because we were a little nervous because of the pandemic and the problem that we were having in raising funds for the students. And certainly I want you to know that the students certainly appreciate. They were very, very good students and who we feel would do well.
Wonderful. So right up front, I want to say that our goal this year is to raise at least as much as we did last year. I believe that we raised enough for one of the scholarships, and that is certainly our goal again this year, to be able to help you out in that way. Yeah, go ahead.
Incidentally, the 3 that were selected last year are in the universities, and I think there are 2 in universities in Minnesota, 1 here at UNL, and we always try to follow up on them. It's very difficult. They're young people and that they're
Sure.
about their lives, but we try to follow up as much as we can, because we want to be able to tell those students, or to encourage those students who might apply, what they can do and how they can achieve as well. And we've had some very good students that have applied and who are successful. So
Of course.
we feel like we're doing something right there. Yeah, the pandemic has caused us to approach things differently, but we haven't stopped. Meaning
Right.
that we still meet. We have not missed a meeting since during the pandemic. We are still working with the Lincoln Public Schools in trying to help with students, especially students of color who may need help and encouragement, as well as with teachers, as we can support them, and the school system, because a lot of these persons who retired were in the school system, who understand what's
Right.
going on in the school system, and certainly want to support and make sure that things are continually done well. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and we certainly look forward to working with you and Unitarian Church in a way that we possibly can. Thank you for your support.
Same. If you're watching this online or in person, I'd like you to consider a contribution to the NAACP for Share the Plate. The easiest way to do that is to give through text giving. All you do is simply text UC Lincoln to 73256. That's UC Lincoln to 73256, and follow the prompts. You can also send a check before the end of the month to 6300 A Street, and the zip code is 68510. Thank you very much for considering it. And thank you very much for being here with us today, Dr. Mays.
Thank you.
As Martin Luther King Jr., whose life we celebrate tomorrow, wrote, "Our goal is to create a beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives." Joys and sorrows. Each week, we join together online and in person as a community to mark important moments and movements in our lives. Some are joyful, some cause us sorrow. Both are present along the journey of our lives. Let us make a loving space for each other, whether we're together here or joining with us electronically, and extend our warm welcome to our members and friends and all those who share our larger work to preserve and build a work of justice and compassion. Let us welcome those parts of ourselves unseen and often unattended. If anyone wishes, please say aloud or record in the chat box your name or the names of those you'd like remembered, so that we may share the weight of your sorrow and gently hold your concern in our hearts. I'll repeat the names of those who are spoken here, and Bob Huson will repeat the names of those in the chat box online. Diane and Sue. Ted and Christine.
From our chat, thoughts for Kathy Hyatt, Wendy Hines. In sorrow, anyone experiencing a breakup or heartache, you are loved and you are enough. Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas. That is a joy, I'm assuming. My sister Deirdre. Christine Davis says, me as I continue my healing journey from breast cancer diagnosis in November. Remembering Sharad Said's father, who died this day in 1975, the family of Bob Ewald, Kathy and Mark, and Christine Davis.
Now, let us join with those who wish to celebrate a milestone or a stepping stone in joy. Please say or record your name or the names of those you want us to join with you in celebration.
My son Ben and daughter-in-law Amy, both of whom survived surgeries and are recovering well in just the last week or two.
Wendy asks us to join with her for her son Dan and Ben
Yep.
and daughter-in-law Sue. Amy, 100%, huh? Who are recovering from successful surgeries.
Our daughter Erica and her wife Megan, who are pregnant.
Erica and Megan, who are pregnant. Bree.
A few more here from our chat. Julie Anderson writes, thinking of Dad today on what would have been his 95th birthday. We have a concern for Val. Jack, who turns 4 on the 24th, and we are so happy he is in our lives. Pure joy to be around. My 100-year-old grandmother died last week peacefully from Katie McDougal, surrounded by love, the end of a life well lived. Pam Wakeman survived shoulder surgery on January 3rd. Lori Stratman has a joy. The Stratmans have a new to them Subaru. Christine Davis says, my daughters and many others for all their care.
Thank you, Bob. We acknowledge that everyone's not ready to share each experience, but choose to offer them in another way or hold them unspoken. Let us join with you in a shared silence. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Arden Eli Hill. My pronouns are he or they. Natalie Briscoe begins her 2017 article, Look for the Unbuilders, with a parable in which a carpenter, invited to the country rulers to have dinner, begins preparations for the journey. The carpenter, who customarily focuses on building, undertakes etiquette lessons, buys new clothes, and reviews topics to discuss with the ruler, but becomes waylaid on the journey to the palace by multiple building projects. Fortunately, along the way, the carpenter meets the unbuilder, who teaches the carpenter that it is impossible to reach the kingdom if the focus on building things, no matter how beautiful, distracts from arriving at the destination. Like the carpenter, Briscoe says, in the development of our UU faith, we build a culture. Quote, churches, curricula, pedagogy, programs, worship services, polity, governance, end quote. Over time, these elements of UU culture became familiar and comfortable. They became who we are and how we do things. We equate the culture that has been built with our identity as UUs. Why would we want to change what has been created? But Briscoe reminds us that sometimes the only way to transform the world through active, forceful, and fearless creation of love and justice is to evaluate how the culture in which we swim might effectively marginalize others whom we wish to invite into fellowship. Referring to James T. Fowler's work, The Stages of Faith Development, Briscoe says that sometimes the things we built with such care and time become the things which stand in the way of our journey. We must take them apart in order to remember what about them was so important to begin with. She notes that the values that form the foundation of our faith can be held captive by the culture we have created and prevent us from embodying those values and fulfilling our desire to be welcoming of those who might find aspects of our culture alienating. Briscoe assures us that changing the aspect of our church culture that may reflect aspects of white supremacy only deepens our UU mission if the mission wasn't there to begin with. She says, if the work is clear and we understand ourselves to truly be the builders of the beloved community, then this process won't destroy us. It will set us free. Today, the Among Group is inviting all of us to join in this challenging work, knowing that it reflects our collective desire for freedom and dignity for all. Our hymn is number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Cameron Chattil, she, her, hers. To enter the Unitarian Church of Lincoln is to pass by our covenant of right relations adopted by the congregation at the May 2017 meeting. We covenant to treat one another as we would wish to be treated, with respect, regard for healthy boundaries, accountability, open-mindedness, and equanimity, freely offering our tangible and sustained stewardship and engagement to realize our mission and vision. We covenant uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and our world, no small task. And long term, to pass through the gallery on the way to the sanctuary is to witness our 150-year commitment to social justice, loving kindness, peace, equality, and growth. The display dramatically illustrates that members of the Unitarian Church of Lincoln have a history of showing up even when the work has been formidable. Our efforts to engage and dismantle white supremacy within our denomination, congregation, and community were renewed in 2017 when we joined over 500 Unitarian Universalist churches in a teach-in addressing racism and white privilege, led at our church by Reverend Gretchen Wood. A month later, at the General Assembly, the Unitarian Universalist Association established a commission to consider an eighth principle, a call to action, to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. In a sermon that August, Reverend Oscar Sinclair, noting that white supremacy has been wrapped into our churches, entangled in our culture in ways that we will take decades of sustained effort to change, calling on the congregation to start the conversation toward ratification of the eighth principle. More than 50 members of the Unitarian Church of Lincoln answered the call and joined in conversation with congregations across the country at the 2018 General Assembly in Kansas City. They came home inspired to do the hard work that lay ahead. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln Board, recognizing that the eighth principle is a call to action, one that impacts our spirituality and community in new ways, identified as one of the 3 priorities for the 2020-2021 church year, addressing and engaging with racial justice in the larger Lincoln community through training and education. The board established the task force to dismantle white supremacy and charged them with 3 areas of focus: providing ongoing training and education, building local relationships, and mobilizing for change. Task force members began with an immersion in a self-directed educational program to better understand the ways each of us reflects our culture, how we often unconsciously center the white experience while diminishing the dignity of people of color.
So hi, I'm Judy Hart. I like to be recognized as she and her. So I'm continuing the discussion of the task force that Emily was speaking about. Over 50 members of the congregation took part in Beloved Conversations, the Within section, which was the first major initiative of the task force. Beloved Conversations is offered by the Foz Collective. It's part of the Meadville Lombard Theological School. Beloved Conversations is designed to assist and support individuals and congregations working toward equality and justice. Working individually and collectively, participants had the opportunity to embody racial justice as a spiritual practice, summoning compassion, grace, risk-taking, vulnerability, and healing in order to lay the foundation for personal transformation as well as in community with others. So a year ago this month, the task force launched an audit of staff and lay leaders and a survey of our congregation to discover the level of knowledge and commitment to dismantling white supremacy. Both the audit and the survey results show an awareness, a readiness, and an enthusiasm to tackle the ongoing and difficult work ahead. I think you're seeing the survey results on this slide. If you don't have time to read it all, the slide actually will also be on the website. You continue to read. You read, I'll talk. This past summer, as the Board of Trustees identified the church's priorities for this church year, they recognized the importance of continuing our engagement with the world through our commitment to dismantle racism, to address the effects of climate change, and to recertify our LGBTQA welcoming congregation status. Their decision reflects the church's deep commitment to social justice. Members of the Among Group applaud their decision because the devaluation of our precious earth by ignoring climate change and the willingness to turn our eyes from the oppression and marginalization of others, whether they are BIPOC or LGBTQA+, are interrelated ways in which the violence of white supremacy continues.
To white people who care about maintaining a habitable planet, I need you to become actively anti-racist. I need you to understand that our inequality crisis is intertwined with the climate crisis. If we don't work on both, we will succeed at neither. 49% of white Americans are concerned or alarmed about climate change. For Black Americans, that's 57%, and for Latinx people in the US, it's 70%. We're missing a huge number of people who already care and want to help and be part of the solution, but can't because of this burden of racism and state violence and white supremacy and mass incarceration. They are dealing with all these other things. We are distracted. We are spread too thin. We are asked to compartmentalize ourselves when in reality we need all hands on deck in this moment. And so this is not a matter of diversity just because it's nice. It's a matter of diversity if we want to have any chance of winning and addressing the climate crisis.
Hi, I'm Marcia Cedardahl, and my pronouns are she and hers. Shortly, we will ask the congregation to commission the work of the 18-member Among Group, thus committing our church to embody racial justice as a spiritual practice. Last year, with more than 32 others, these congregants began the beloved Conversations Within study, which began with personal examinations related to race and racism. The second phase of the beloved conversation, Among, shifts its focus to the changes required by congregations to eradicate white supremacy in our structures and systems, and in so doing, moves us closer to radical inclusion, racial justice, and ultimately collective liberation. The third phase of the program, Beyond, to launch in the fall of this year, 2022, will focus on work outside our congregations with our local communities. As our congregation participates in Among, members of the team will be taking time to look closely and honestly at the systems of our congregation, the way we do things, the policies and procedures that we have, the outcomes of our various ministries, and considering ways that those systems need to shift and change in order to be closer in line with our shared faith and values of justice, equity, and inclusion. Our Among team will work to examine ways to translate our religious commitments into tangible actions. Although social and racial justice are often seen in our Unitarian Universalist communities as work to be done out there, in the community beyond the walls of our congregations, we know it is our responsibility to first put our own house in order, to endeavor to align our systems in all parts of our congregations with our deepest held values and highest aspirations. This is the work that our Among team will be engaged in this year. Today, we ask you, our supporting congregation, to bestow upon the members of this team the authority we need to carry out these works, to give your blessings to this ministry in the coming year, and to affirm their call to this role.
I'm Joellen Polzine. My pronouns are she, her, hers. As part of the commissioning this important work, please read the following with me. Is it up there? We, the members of the Unitarian Church of Lincoln, commission you as members of our congregation's Among team. We are grateful for your willingness to serve this important role. We trust you. We ask you to help us better understand the ways that our congregational systems do not align with our deepest held values. We ask you to lead us in the necessary work of transformation and move us ever closer to justice. We ask you to be agents of change in our congregation, helping us all to work towards the goals of eradicating racism and fostering radical inclusion. We support your work and commit to the larger goal of racial justice and liberation.
I'm Lori Stratman. My pronouns are she and hers. And I am the current Board of Trustees president for the Unitarian Church of Lincoln. On behalf of the congregation, I charge you as members of our Among team to take a discerning, loving, and honest look at the ways our congregation does things, how we have structured our systems, the outcomes of how those systems operate, and who they benefit, and whether they are in line with our religious commitments to justice, equity, and inclusion of all. To take time to learn from the wisdom of others about different ways of doing things, new ideas to try, and examples of systems that de-center whiteness and center the needs of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. To be bold in your vision of how our congregation could be a radically inclusive, anti-racist, transformative spiritual home for so many people. To remind yourselves and us of the beauty, joy, love, wholeness, and truth that can be found when we engage honestly in a process of reflection, experimentation, and transformation. To care for yourselves and one another in the process, and to ask for help when you need it. Know that the work that you do is powerful, valued, and needed. Know that our entire congregation is here to support you. Know that you are enough.
I'm Wendy Hesterman. My pronouns are she and hers. As a representative of the Among team, I respond for all of us. We gratefully accept this charge to serve. We commit ourselves to the faithful work of transformation, both personal and systemic. We will be bold, creative, open-minded, and steadfast in our work together as a team. We are proud to be part of a congregation committed to racial justice and will honor that commitment in our learning, actions, and ways of being together. We are grateful to work together to help bring our congregation ever closer to alignment with our values and our vision of the beloved community.
Please read with me. Is the slide there? Thank you. As your congregation, we now commission you as our Among team for the coming year. Thank you for all you will give and for the transformation you will lead. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so. Our closing hymn is number 1017, We Are Building a New Way.
Our closing words today are by Lila Ibrahim from Bless the Imperfect, Meditations for Congregational Leaders. We are not in church to be with people who want to sing the same music or rally for the same cause or attend the same retreats. We are in church to learn to love better. We disagree, we annoy, we flake out on one another. And we worship, we support, we hold and we affirm one another. There is really only one choice between imperfect community and no community. Again and again, we are called to choose to commit ourselves to building a more just, more diverse, and yet ever messy and imperfect, beloved community.
Go in peace, go in kindness, go in love, go in faith. Leave the day behind us. Day is done. Go in grace, Let us go into the dark, not afraid, not alone. Let us hope by some good pleasure safely to arrive at home. Let us hope by some good pleasure safely to arrive at home.
Oh, you didn't say that was hard. Harry, thank you. That was hard work. Thank you for everybody who was here today. It's not a problem.
I don't know where my mind was.
It's not a problem.